Chapter 16, More of Nell's Story. How's that? Nell asked her audience. Want more? Yes, please, shouted everyone. Okay, said Nell, unless anyone wants to take over from me. Mughal shook his head. This is your story, he said. Go ahead. Nell held the pink folder up and found her place again. Then she continued to read. As the children walked up the path towards the house, they could hear the sound of someone playing a violin. It's Grank, whispered Tom. Oh, I can't wait, hissed Alice, and began to run towards the old carved front door. Hold on, shouted Tom, running after her. They always fought over who would get to ring the doorbell, a large brass thing that Grank had rescued from the church in which he'd been married to Great. When the church had finally crumbled away and the powers that be had decided to demolish the place, Grank had paid quite a bit of money to buy the old church bell. He then built a cubby house above his front door in which to hang the bell and its scarlet cord. Grank's new front doorbell became the loudest in the neighbourhood. Alice pulled wildly at the red cord until Tom snatched it from her hands and pulled even harder. Alice grabbed the cord back and the pair ended up in fits of laughter. Finally, the front door opened and Tate Freeman, known as Great, emerged to meet her great-grandchildren. Tate was a tiny but imperious woman. One glare from her eyes could silence a room full of people. Today, though, she was all smiles as she hugged Alice and Tom. Nell stopped reading and yawned. That's enough for today, isn't it? She teased. No, was the resounding reply from the tunnel kids and her own children. I'll keep going then, shall I? Yes. Okay, back to the story. How are you both? Great, asked Tom and Alice, staring at their faces to see if she could detect any secrets. Good, said Tom. Extra good for seeing you, smiled Alice, nuzzling into her mother's arms. Where's Grank? We could hear him playing. He's rehearsing a special song for you, said Great, with a twinkle in her eye. What is it? Whispered Tom. A surprise, answered Great. Come on, and we'll see if he's ready. Great led the children towards Frank Freeman's study. It was Frank who'd one day tired of being called Great Grandfather, Great Granddad, and Great Frank. One Christmas day, he simply announced that he would like to be called Grank. And Great Tate, of course, could be known as Great to match Grank. And so Frank and Tate became Grank and Great. Grank liked to complain every so often that his name hadn't turned out quite as nicely as Great's name, but everyone knew that he liked the craziness of Grank. Into the wood of his study door he'd carved in a strange font, Grank. Alice and Tom could barely contain their excitement as they waited outside Grank's study while Great checked to see if her husband was ready to play. Suddenly the door was flung open and Grank leapt into the hallway playing a wild song on his violin. When he'd finished, he fell onto one knee and kissed Alice's hand before leaping up to shake both of Tom's hands so hard that Tom wondered if any bones had been broken. How are my bodacious grandchildren? How are my bodacious great-grandchildren? I think we'll have to call you Grildren, or maybe Grids, instead of great-grandkids. My dearest Grids, I have a wonderful piece to play for you. Now, Grom and Grallis, are you ready? Yes, Grom and Grallis. Why didn't I think of that earlier? Asked Grank. But without waiting for a response, he continued, I've been practicing for 2 weeks, so I hope you like it. You must clap really hard when I finish, because otherwise I'll be hurt. And that would be sad, wouldn't it? Grank put his violin under his chin and began to play the Happy Birthday song. He played it so quickly that Tom and Alice could hardly keep up with it. When it was over, they clapped hard and fast because they knew that Grank only liked that sort of clapping. Do you want to know why I've made such a wild birthday song? Grank asked. The children nodded. I'm sick of all those mournful Christmas carols, So this year, when I go to church, I'm going to play Jesus a birthday song, and Greg's going to make some birthday cakes, and we're going to blow out all the candles all together, and everyone can have a piece. What do you think? Will it be a chocolate birthday cake? Asked Tom. There will be 2 birthday cakes, said Grank. A chocolate one for the grown-ups and a fruit cake for everyone under 20. No, groaned Tom and Alice. Everyone will have whichever cake they like, Great, corrected Grank. And I've made a test cake to eat today, a chocolate one. Interested? Before anyone could answer, Grank had gone, and there was a terrible crashing in the kitchen as he tried to be the first person to cut the practice cake. Later on that day, Tom and Alice asked if they could do some exploring. Great and Grank said they'd be busy inside, but that the children were welcome to play in the garden if they liked. Alice wanted to check the little mirrors in the pear tree. Boring, said Tom. Oh, come on, wheedled Alice. They're so cute. But Tom refused, saying he wanted to look at the fish. So Alice wandered down to the pear tree by herself. But after climbing up to gaze at herself in several tiny mirrors, she decided to lie down under the tree and look at the mirrors from above. She decided to lie down under the tree and look at the mirrors from below. As she stared up from the soft mossy grass into the tree, something caught her eye. There was a mirror right in the top branches. There was something about the way it was sending out bright flashes. Alice wanted to look more closely, so she went back up into the wizened old branches. As she drew nearer to the mirror, she recognized it as an old hand mirror that used to sit on a dressing table in Great's private bedroom. Great and Grank shared a bedroom together, but they also had what they called their private bedrooms, in which they sometimes slept alone. The mirror had always been a favourite with Alice. It was backed with silver, into which tiny gemstones had been laid. She wondered why Great would tie her beautiful mirror so far up in a tree. Alice kept climbing higher and higher, trying to reach the mirror. The branches were flimsy at the top, and Alice felt a bit unsafe as she reached the mirror. When she grasped it in her hand, she held the mirror up to her face. To her surprise, the reflection of her face inside the mirror was moving like an image inside a computer screen. As she watched, her reflection dissolved into a silvery gas, and then some shiny steam started to come out of the mirror. It covered her body until she couldn't see anything but shimmery silver steam. With a surge of fear, Alice realized that she was becoming smaller and smaller. She was being drawn into the hand mirror that she was holding. Finally, her hand, the one holding the mirror, became too small to hold the handle any longer, and she was fully inside the mirror. Looking back out of the mirror, she could see the leaves of the tree, the sky with its wispy summer clouds, and the green lawn way down at the bottom of the tree. Meanwhile, Tom was nearing the fish pond. There were always goldfish in there, but sometimes Grank would add a few different fish to please Tom. Tom loved gazing into the long, winding pond, trying to count all the fish. There were more than 100, so it was a hopeless task, but fun all the same. At the very end of the pond, there was a little secret place. Grank had put a fountain in there, but it had never worked very well. It was made from a silly sort of fish statue, one you might find in a cartoon. Tom liked hiding in the secret place. The fish statue was covered in greenish moss that looked like the statue's clothes. Grank had planted a mixture of blue and white lobelia around the statue's fishtail to make it seem as if the fish was leaping out of the churning sea of flowers, and water poured out of the fish's open mouth. Tom noticed that someone had glued pieces of broken mirror onto the front of the fish. It made him look rather grand, as if his green moss coat was buttoned up with tiny pieces of mirrored glass. Tom leaned in to get a closer look at the mirrors. He imagined it might make him look quite funny to be reflected back in the little pieces of mirror. When Tom looked into the mirrors, he could see himself quite clearly as tiny little Tom reflections. But Tom could also see something else, something quite strange. It was Alice, mouthing words at him. He looked around to see where she was, but Alice was neither behind him nor beside him. He spun back to the mirrors. Alice was still there, waving and calling silently from inside the mirror. Tom spun around again. "Alice," he said, "where are you? Stop it. This is my secret place, not yours." There was only silence. Alice wasn't at the fish pond. Tom thrust his hands into the bushes to try and catch his sister, but nothing happened. All was still. But when he looked back to the mirrors, there she was again, waving. Whatever was happening? Nell looked at her audience. Everyone was asleep except for Toll. After looking around, he telepathed to Nell. "Still no news. Dad and Solo have split up, but they can't find any sign of them." Nell sighed. "What can we do?" she telepathed. "Keep reading the story," replied Toll out loud. "But they're asleep," said Nell. "I'm not," said Petrel, opening her eyes. "Me neither," said Bullant. "Keep going," said Nose. "Yes," said Tilly. "Squid's out to it," added Petrel, "but she will sleep through anything." "It's a great story," said Nose with a smile. "Really good," said Petrel. Nell grinned. "Thank you. Here goes." Tom became aware of a tiny voice. It was so soft that Tom thought it was his own imagination. "Tom, I'm in here," he heard. Then, "Tom Mays, it's Alice. Come and talk to me." Tom looked around, not realizing where the sound was coming from. "I'm inside the mirror. Come and talk to me." "Alice?" asked Tom, feeling strange. Is that you inside the mirrors?" "I don't know how many mirrors I'm inside," said Alice in a tiny voice. "I was in the pear tree, trying to look into a silver hand mirror, and the next minute there was silvery steam, and I became really tiny, and then I was sucked into the mirror somehow. And now I'm in a strange room full of little windows, although it seems to be made of vapour. There are hundreds of windows in here. I was trying to get out, and then I saw you. You look like a giant." "Far out," said Tom. "Should I go and get Grank? I don't know what to do." "Don't bother Grank. We'll think of something," said Alice. Her voice was so tiny that Tom had to lean right over the fish statue to hear it all. All of a sudden, the surfaces of the mirrors on the fish started to look like water. Everything began to ripple and move. Alice looked like she was under lots of little swimming pools. Tom dipped his finger into one of the mirrors, and it was wet. He heard Alice calling out a warning, "Don't, Tom, don't touch it." And then Tom felt like he was being sucked underwater by a gigantic riptide. He realized that he was being dragged through the mirror at the same time as his whole body was shrinking. After getting smaller and smaller, Tom found himself standing beside Alice, inside a room with many windows. They were both looking out at the fish pond, which now seemed enormous. "At least we're the same size," said Tom. "I felt like a giant in the land of the fairies before." "I feel like a fairy," said Alice. "We're both so little. Look at the fish pond. It's massive." "Where are we?" asked Tom. "Don't ask me," said Alice. "We can't be far away because we can still see Grank and Great's garden." Tom looked impatient. "Have you tried all the windows?" he asked. "I've only been here for a few minutes," said Alice. "Sorry," said Tom. "I'm just tired and I wanted to have some more of that chocolate cake. Now we're stuck inside some mirror room. I want to go back to the house." "Hey," said Alice, "I can see the house from this one." Alice was looking out of the top window. the top windows in the strange room. Tom joined her. They could see into Grank's study through one window, and another one looked into the kitchen. There's the hallway, said Tom, cheering up a little. And that's my bedroom. It seems that we can see into every room in the house that has a mirror in it. It's like we're looking into the rooms from inside their mirrors, said Alice. What about Grank's boat, said Tom. That has a mirror in the cabin. He ran around looking for the right mirror. As he was running, though, his foot started to fall through the floor of the mirror room, which was turning into silver quicksand. Alice, he shouted, I'm falling. With a loud smack, Nell killed a mosquito that had landed right on top of the page she was reading. Surely that's enough, isn't it? She asked, looking at everyone. No, came the loud response. It's the whole lot or none at all, said Toll. That's what you always say, said Tilly, looking at her mother. That's what you always say, said Tilly, looking at her brother. You do say that, said Nell, with a solemn look. All right, then. Oh, sorry, I did need to just stop there for a sec. No, came the loud response. That's what you always say, said Tilly, looking at her mother. It's the whole lot or none at all, said Toll. All right, said Nell, but someone must bring me another hot drink. I will, said Toll. I will, said Toll. But wait, but don't start without me. I don't want to miss out on any Grank.